Hi, my name is Elizabeth Dick, and I work with the Kenya Agroecology Hub. I'm here to talk to you today about the role of Manor House Agricultural Centre in the development and expansion of Kenya AE Hub FRNs. So you might be asking, why a focus on Manor House Agricultural Centre? What does it have to do with us? Well, for the Kenya AE Hub, it has been a critical component of our FRN strategy. And we thought that by explaining this to you, you might find something useful that you can apply in your situation, and/or you can give us some critical feedback on what we've been attempting to do. So to begin with, Manor House is interesting because it has been developed to specifically exemplify many of the principles of agroecology. These principles are being put to use in its farming system. As a result, it seems to be a very conducive environment for farmer learning. Secondly, Manor House has research capacity, which enables a rapid response to research questions arising from FRN trials. And thirdly, we've developed a student apprenticeship program in agroecology, which we think will provide a human capacity for field support for future FRN activities. So first, let me orient you as to where Manor House Agricultural Centre is. You can see by that star that it's in East Africa, specifically in Western Kenya. The center is at around 1,900 meters above sea level, and it's in the countryside, but it's only 10 kilometers away from a major town, Kitale, which has a population of over 170,000 people. Coming down further so that you can actually see Manor House from above, you can see it's kind of a slice in the landscape. I've tried to delineate this since my cursor wouldn't work, but the line is pretty wavy, but I believe you can tell what's Manor House and what isn't. Manor House is comprised of about 41 acres. It was founded in 1984 as a not-for-profit trust. And for many years, it taught students and farmers the elements of biointensive agriculture. About 10 years ago, it began to switch and now is firmly focused on agroecology. I'd like to show you the various levels of that slice that is Manor House, upper, middle, and lower, so you can see some of its components. I won't mention them all, but just a few to get you oriented. So if you start on the top of this map, you'll see staff housing, a staff garden, then an apiary section, a value addition section, which is a new building where farmers are working with us to develop value-added products. The kitchen section, very important. We'll get to that in a few minutes. One of our several gardens, in this case, the student garden. We also have here a poultry section, some azolla ponds, and a vermiculture section. The middle slice is starting at the top with the round hall. This is a conference and training facility where we do a lot of our classroom work and the FRN workshops with farmers. Then you see some of our livestock, the pig section, goat section, dairy section, and also, very importantly, the compost section. It says Boma compost, but actually we make several different kinds of compost there, as you'll see. There are more gardens here, including the irrigated garden, which uses water from the water pans. More on that in a bit. We have a newly established food forest, and you begin to see our production fields, which are continued in the lower section of the farm. And you can see that each production field is surrounded by either a natural forest or at least a boundary on the contour line of perennial species. So to begin a discussion of how we're using agroecological principles, we'd like to start with the principle that really is always very compelling to us, and that is agrobiodiversity. And as I think you saw on the map that I just showed you, Manor House has considerable diversity at the landscape level. You saw those clumps of woods intermixed with production fields. So you can see, for example, here a production field that happens to be in soybeans, and it's very close by our food forest. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner. The food forest has just been implemented, so it's going to grow up more. And then below you can see some of our boundary plantings. In this case, this is along the student garden. And again, we try to increase biodiversity by bordering fields with perennial species. Going on to some of our crop and livestock diversity, we've already seen on the map several of our livestock sections. We grow a lot of staple food at Manor House. For us, that's maize and beans. But we also grow alternative crops. Why? Because we are growing these crops because they're highly nutritious. We found they can grow well at Manor House and in other locations in Kenya. And we would like to see whether they can be adopted for home use and even for marketing. So those include buckwheat. You can see that growing next to the maize in the upper left-hand corner. Below that, quinoa. On the far right lower corner, you can see we have lots of horticultural crops at Manor House in all those gardens. This is a picture of some cherry tomatoes. We're trialing cherry tomato varieties to see if they can escape late blight, which is a problem for us. And then in the lower center, some sunflowers, and we use the sunflowers to press oil. So this agrobiodiversity leads us to another very important principle of agroecology, resilience. It does so by enhancing soil health, leading to more effective pest and disease management, providing us with a diet of higher nutritional value, improving livestock health and nutrition, and very importantly, adding value for income generation. Going on to another important principle for us, efficiency. A couple of years ago, we experienced a very bad drought, and we began to rethink our ideas on water collection and storage. In the meantime, you can see some of the things we've implemented. We now catch all the rainwater from our rooftops, and the overflow rainwater there and from pathways and roads is channeled down to 2 water pans. Each water pan can hold 750,000 liters of water, and you can see one in the process of being filled and the other full. This water collection system has really helped us. It's helped us in several dry seasons, and we hope that it's going to provide a buffer for what may become even more erratic patterns of precipitation. We take efficiency very seriously. When we were in the middle of our drought and our livestock was suffering, we were kicking ourselves because we can produce plenty of animal forage and feed during the rainy season. We just need to store it. So this kicked off an effort at silage making. Our students have enthusiastically adopted silage making. You can see them here chopping up Napier and Brachiaria grass and then using 2 methods of storing the silage. In the center, you can see a student pounding in silage into a 100-kilo bag. This is a very popular method with farmers. You can see them in the background looking on because those bags are readily available and are not expensive. Or we've also used the bunker approach for larger scale storage. In both cases, these methods allow for indefinite storage of the silage without it going bad. One last thing on efficiency, energy efficiency. This is a key goal for us. We have several things going on here. We have a biogas production at Manor House, and so we cook with biogas in the kitchen, and we also use the slurry to top dress crops. We have installed solar panels on several of our buildings for electricity and water heating, and our new building is also going to be solar powered. On the right, you can see one of the energy efficient cook stoves we've installed in our kitchen. This is important for 2 reasons. One, of course, it saves on fuel, in this case firewood, but 2, it's reduced the smoke inhalation that our staff used to suffer from. So that's been wonderful. We think that we're applying many of the principles of agroecology to our farming system, but in the interest of time, I won't go through all of our theories, but I would like to talk a little bit about circular economy. We strive to feed our staff, visitors, workshop participants from the farm. We're not nearly there yet. We have a lot of work to do, but we have been making some good strides in alternative livestock feed production. So we've tried several approaches. Two of the most promising you can see in the upper left, some of the beds in our vermicomposting facility. So there we make compost. We also produce red worms, which we are feeding to our chickens as a supplement. And we also got another benefit from the vermicomposting system. And you can see that bucket is full of vermicomposting leachate. We call it vermiliquid. We've incorporated that in our biofertilizer trials and found it to be a very effective biofertilizer in terms of promoting crop growth and yield. We've also tried azolla production, and that is also going well. And you're going to hear about in a minute some experimentation we're doing with azolla as part of the chicken ration. So we have a lot of things going on in Manor House in our farming system, and farmers have an opportunity to get to know what's going on there during our week-long FRN planning workshops. So you can see here a typical workshop group of participants. We usually have around 35 participants. They're mostly farmer representatives of farmer groups, but also some staff of the organizations that work with those farmer groups. And you can see behind this group portrait the round hall that I mentioned on the map. Here's the inside of the round hall where we do a lot of what we call our classroom work. And so farmers spend half days doing this classroom work, which really focuses on information sharing and group discussions. Small group discussions, large group discussions. They get very intensive as the farmers work together to plan their FRN activities. But what we find is this intensive work is also exhausting. And so farmers spend the rest of their time exploring the farming system and enterprises at Manor House and engaging in several practical exercises. So for example, on the left, you're seeing farmers learning to make an anaerobically fermented biofertilizer called Viro. And on the right, these farmers are in our value-added center, and this particular group was working on preservation methods, food preservation methods, and specifically the lady is making mango jam. So what we found is that when farmers are exposed to the agroecological principles and practice at Manor House during these week-long sessions, and they're fully engaged in many of the practices that they see at Manor House, that this can result in rapid adoption and scaling up of practices that farmers find worthwhile in their context. And so an example of this is bokashi making. You're probably all familiar with bokashi. It's a compost-like biofertilizer. One of its main attributes is that it can be prepared and ready for use in 14 days. Our farmer groups that we are working with are very excited about bokashi. So in 2021, we began to include bokashi making sessions in our FRN workshops. You can see that on the left, a group of farmers is just about finishing up a bokashi pile with one of our staff members. Well, since then, bokashi has really taken off among the farmer communities in Western Kenya and even Central Kenya. And we get picture after picture from farmers documenting their bokashi making. They send these to us on the WhatsApp groups associated with the FRNs. And amazingly, we recently heard from one of the organizations we cooperate with, FIPS, that since they sent a group of their farmers to one of our workshops in February of this year, they've actually documented around 450 farmers who have now begun experimenting with bokashi. So this is an example of the real power, we think, of this approach of exposing farmers to this AE farming system at Manor House. Another thing that Manor House does, I've mentioned this before, but it is critically important, is that it grows seeds and seedlings for farmer network trials. On the left, you can see a farmer in his plot of lablab. Lab is a multi-purpose grain legume. Farmers in FRNs have been working with it to control the parasitic weed striga with good success. They're rotating it with maize and sorghum, and it's decreasing striga incidence and increasing yield. On the right, you can see another legume. This is a shrub, Tephrosia vogeli. It's a pesticidal plant. And the ecotypes we grow at Manor House are particularly potent in terms of pesticidal activity. The problem is, so these are both very valuable plants. They have multiple benefits in an agroecosystem. But the problem is that in Kenya, anyway, you can't buy these seeds of these plants in the commercial seed industry or even access them through the National Research System. So Manor House has been critical in producing seed and distributing it to farmers so they can begin experimenting with these species. I mentioned briefly that Manor House has a research section. This is usually around 6 people, and this has really helped us to deal with questions arising from FRN trials. In fact, before we even started the biofertilizer FRN, we were worried because we couldn't find much information on the use of biofertilizers in the East African context. So we actually did several years of experiments looking at which biofertilizer are most efficacious, what concentration to use, timing, etc. And this baseline information has been really valuable for us and for farmers as we started up a biofertilizer FRN in February of this year. But as you all know, once FRNs get up and running and trialing starts, unusual things happen that you wouldn't have anticipated, problems arise that you never foresaw. So for example, again, in the biofertilizer FRN, we began hearing reports from farmers that they were very pleased with bokashi and other biofertilizers, but they were worried because bokashi, although it uses mostly farm available materials, requires a few purchased ingredients. For example, cereal bran, wheat bran, maize bran, or rice bran. And with the inflation occurring in Kenya, farmers are increasingly saying they just can't afford that ingredient. And so they asked us to come up with an altered recipe with substitutes that would be either more affordable or available on farm. And they began suggesting things to us. So what you see there in the graph is a daily temperatures in bokashi piles made with bran and bran substitutes. This is a little experiment we implemented a couple of months ago in response to farmers' requests. And they suggested we try spoiled maize kernels instead of bran. It's called mauzo. And so we did in this trial, and you can see the purple line is in fact the spoiled maize kernels, and you can see that it's heating up quite well during the composting, during the 14-day period, and so has actually successfully gone through the composting needed to make a finished product during that time. So this is quite promising. We have a lot more work to do, other things the farmers are suggesting us to test. But this is an example of our rapid response at Manor House to research questions arising from FRN trialing. Finally, I want to talk a little bit more about the student program at Manor House. Students have been present at Manor House since its inception, but in 2022, we decided to make a major change. We instituted a 1-year apprenticeship program in agroecology, and we're seeing the first class about to graduate from it. The students here, just like the farmers, are steeped in agroecological principles and get a lot of practice by working in the farming system at Manor House, and also learning the basic elements of research and farmer trialing. So for example, here on the left, you see 2 students who are working on an azolla experiment. We're looking at what concentration of azolla is possible in chick feed. So they're doing some they've done some feeding there during the trial. And then on the right side, you see 2 students who developed their own little experiment on bran substitutes in bokashi. So they're taking data on pile temperatures. And I think our next move with the student program is to involve them in 2024 directly in some FRN activities. We're instituting a new FRN close to the Manor House Centre, and students will be actually participating in the planning and implementation of the FRN. So all these activities that the students are undergoing, the learning, the theory, the practice, will really, we think, help to provide future field support for FRN activities and agroecological activities in general. So to summarize, Manor House is really a critical component of our FRN strategy. It's an attempt by us to develop a farming system that puts into practice AE principles. Now I say attempt because this is imperfect. There's some elements that we're missing. Some of our approaches don't always work. But I think by trying this, we are learning a lot, and the farmers that are coming to experience Manor House are really learning with us. This experiment has provided a venue where farmers can explore, engage with, even argue about AE methods and practices, and they can really steep themselves for a week away from their farming concerns to really explore methods and practices that could be useful to them on their farms. Manor House is also a producer of germplasm for farmer trials. And lastly, again, it's a training center for the next generation of AE-focused development workers. So we welcome your questions and feedback. But before I leave you, I just want to show you some of the wonderful staff at Manor House and in the Kenya AE Hub. There are about 18 full-time staff members at Manor House. You're not seeing all of them here, but a goodly portion of them. And then on the far right-hand side, we have the Kenya Hub principal investigators. That's Beth Medvecki at the top, David Stern in the middle, and I'm in the lower corner there, Elizabeth Dick. Again, thank you so much. I look forward to your questions and comments.